Okay. Alright, hello everyone. What we're doing today, and the same thing applies for what I have in here, is turkey stock. This, you can do the same process with turkey stock, pork stock, beef stock, or whatnot. You can do it for all of them. I just want to show you just basically how it goes. So the things you're going to need is basically your stock. I have it warm. You can have it hot, and instead of using a cup or anything, I just use a pot. If it can get heavy, so I use a pot around this size, and I just put it on in my jars. And the jars just came out of my dishwasher. That's how I went ahead and I sterilized them. So I'm just going to fill it up all the way to the 1 inch mark, and I'll show you what I mean when I do 1 inch. There we go. I'm going to lift it up. The 1 inch mark comes up to about right there. Can you see it? Are you getting me in it? And that's basically where it comes to. So I'm done with this one. I'm going to go ahead and put it aside. And I'm going to grab another one and I'm going to put it in. So I'm just filling my jars right now. Now if you have now the basics of what I'm doing, if you have it that your stock is boiling, it's nice to have it boiling or not or simmering, so that you can go ahead and while you're making it, it'll heat up faster. It'll come to pressure faster. Me, I just got done making this and it's cooled down and it's been in there all day, kinda. That's a little high. I'm going to take a little bit of that out just to make sure, because some of it will leak out too, and I'm going to wipe off my lids, so it's really okay. But why not just do it right, since I'm taking the time to do all this. And I'm going to go ahead and put this aside. But depending on what temperature you have your liquid in, that's the same temperature you're going to want to have your water in your canner. So I'm just filling up the jars. For pints, you'll want to cook it for 20 minutes. And again, refer to your book, because that's for mine's an All-American 930. And it tells me that I'm supposed to cook it for 20 minutes for pints and 25 minutes for quarts. So basically this is what you do. Just fill it up. There's no right or wrong. You're just filling up your jars. And it saves you money, because at the store, broth is expensive. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and fill up the rest of these jars. And when we come back, I'll show you what we're going to do. We're going to end up wiping the rims. And I've already checked my jars before I even washed them to make sure there was no scrapes or cracks or scuffs or anything like that. So these jars have all been checked out already. So I'm going to go ahead and fill up these jars. And when we come back, I will show you how I wipe the rims and how we put the lids on. And while you're doing this, I have my lids right here. Let me bring it on in so I can show you. I have my lids here. I don't have any water just yet. All I wanted you to use the water for is to soften up this orange part right here. So, I will be back. Alright, we're back. I have all the jars filled up. Now what's important is to make sure there's no air bubbles. So I just swish it around like that. And I just make sure I get all the way around. There's probably no air bubbles, but I've done all this work, so I just follow every step. This mainly works for when you're doing other stuff, but I do it. Because you've worked this hard to make it, I want them all to seal. So I make sure I get rid of all air bubbles. Just swish it around real quick. And there's a stick that comes with it. Let me see if it's here. It is here. There's an actual stick that came with it, with the canning stuff. Got it. And when I say the canning stuff, I'm referring to, as you saw, I used this to be able to put stuff on. It came with this, as well as it came with some tongs to help you lift the jars. Now right now, because my liquid is only warm, I can lift it up by hand, but if this had been simmering, my broth had been simmering and it's hot, I'd want to pick it up using this. Okay. So this is what would have came with it. But instead of using this, it comes with it. It also tells you if you're cooking different foods. It tells you, for example, because for different things it tells you you're supposed to have 1-inch headspace, and this is basically 1-inch headspace. You use this to be able to show you, but it's basically the where you see my stuff is at. Your jars, they're kind of helpful. They kind of show you the way. But instead of using that, I go ahead and I just use this. I got a bunch of them skewers that you can use. I got them for $1 and I got like 50 of them or 100 of them in there. And I just swish it around. Now for the blue thing I just showed you, I use that a lot of times whenever I'm doing my meats and stuff like that. But for my meats, sometimes I just pick up the jar and kind of twist it to get out the air bubbles, as well as use the blue thing. So I'm done with that. Next, what I need to do is wipe the rims. So let me do that. And what I'm using, you can use water, but instead I'm going to use white distilled vinegar. That's what I'm going to be using. And the reason why you wipe your rims is because you've done all this work, and if by chance, because there's still a little grease in the stock, it could get on the rim and then it won't seal. And you've done all this work, so it's not just your money you're wasting, but it'd also be your time. So what I'm going to do is just wipe the rims off, each and every one of them. And a lot of times I put them in rows so I won't end up getting confused on what I've done. So I don't jump around while I'm doing it. And it just depends on what you're doing. People sometimes check right now to see if there's any cracks and crannies. But I figure to save me time, instead of doing that, I do it before I've done all the work of actually putting the stuff inside of the jar. So I check it out even before I wash it, which I recommend. So I'm almost done. I'm wiping down all my rims so that nothing will nothing will be stuck on it. Let me flip it. So I'm wiping them all down. And at this time, I should have said earlier, I'm gonna cut on my lids. Right now they're in water. I'm going to take it over to you real quick. And I put hot water in it. Can you see that? There's my jars, or my lids. And what I'm going to do is, I'm going to take them over to the stove. You can keep it there, hon. I'm just going to heat it up. I already have hot water inside of there. So what I'm going to do now is wait on my lids to heat up, or maybe around 3 minutes. I got it on 9 on my stove, so almost high. I just wanted to, before it starts bubbling, take it off. And then I'm going to place them on here. So while it's doing that for 2 minutes, I will bring you back and we will finish this process. Alright, now my jars, I've had my jars going for around 3 minutes. I put them on high. So there's my lids right there. So what I'm going to do is cap all of the stock. And what I have here is one of the gadgets that came with the canning stuff, the jar, not the jar lifter, but it has a little magnet so I can get the jars because it's too hot to put my hands in there. As well as this, and that blue thing, the blue thing which is here. This is all that came with it. So, let me go ahead and put all the lids on. Now they say you can do it one at a time. I just put them on because this kind of goes kind of fast. So I'll put these on, and then after I do this, I'm going to put the rings on. Also, what I did was, you're supposed to put 2 inches worth of water inside of your pressure canner. And that's what it says for my All-American. It may be different for the canner that you have, so of course always check. What you want to make sure is that you have the same temperature that you have inside of the jar, you want to have inside of your canner so your jars don't end up busting. So we're almost done here. Got one more. And another thing, I had a 921 first. Basically it meant that I could do 18 pints and I could do only 7 quarts. And I have a thing that I keep on my, I'll take that out. Oops. Okay, let me move this over so I can grab my lids. And I can move this now. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten up all my jars. And the thing is, they have these things that you can actually buy at Walmart where it can help you to determine how hot you want to, or how hard you want to twist these. Just make it finger tight. You don't want to put it on too hard because as it's cooking, sometimes, many times, air comes out of it. Or not air, but liquid can come out of it, which is okay. The main thing you just want to make sure is that the jar seals. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do all of these. Now this is my 930. I've finished, all of my jars have been capped and lidded, and I want to show you, because I've been doing this a while, what I end up putting into it is 16 cups worth of, I have a jar, or I have a, what is it called? A blender lid, because it has measurements on there. So I just go ahead and use that, and I use around 12 cups, but you're supposed to have 2 inches worth of water. That's about 2 inches. So it should come up to about right there on my hands. So there we go. It pretty much goes right there. So that's perfect. So what I'm going to do, instead of loading all my jars inside of here now, I'm going to go ahead and move this over to the stove, because picking it up, it's ridiculous. I'm not going to do it. But anyway, just so you know, the liquid in here is the same temperature. And of course, I'm not spot on, but I do it by touch or whatnot. But it's the same, around the same temperature as the liquid I have in my jars that I have inside of here. So I'm going to go ahead and move this over to the stove. And I'm going to go ahead and load them in. And what I'm going to do now, since I'm loading my jars, I'm going to go ahead and cut the oven on high, because I want to be able to bring it up to pressure. Can you see this right here? This right here is below these first set of jars, because it's important. You can't let your jars touch the bottom, because it's a good way for them to be able to bust. So I have one of these below these jars that I currently have. I don't know if you can see them. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in now. And it goes up to about, you see where it's going to up to it. It's not covering the lids. So I'm going to put my other one on, because I don't want it to touch. And I'm going to go ahead and put these in. And the nice thing about it is I get to do 14. When I had the 921, it was really nice. But I cook in massive quantities, so when I'm doing it, I wanted to make as much as I possible. So this right here that I have is the 930. Let me go ahead and twist it around so I can put it the right way. Okay, and then what I'm going to do now is get the lid. Can you be able to zoom in and get this arrow right here? Do you see the arrow? There's an arrow right here, as well as there's a little notch right here on the pressure canner. I need to make sure I line it up. So I put it a little far back, and then I use my handle. You can zoom back, hon. You want to get right here. And then I twist it, and I line them up. So now the arrow is lined up with the little niche there. What I do to make sure I twist it on, I use my hands, because I want it to be about the same, because sometimes you can close it up and it'll be where this part has no room down below and this part's way too high. I kind of want to make it the same, so I use my hand as kind of a measuring thing, where I make it so that the lid is the same way instead of kind of tilted, where too much is on that side. So I'm going to go ahead and lock it up, and you do it from side, you do it from across from each other. And I don't tighten it. I just, as soon as I get to the point where it's a little tough to turn, I stop. Because I don't want to tighten it until I have all of the lug nuts on. So there it goes. So now I'm going to tighten them. Tighten it. Tighten it. Tighten it. Tighten it. Tighten it. Tighten it. And now what I want to do, now what I want to do is I'm going to wait for this to vent for 10 minutes. And after it's venting for 10 minutes, that's when I'm going to put my jiggler on. And you need to find out what temperature at. I am above 1,000 feet where I live, so I need to do 15 pounds of pressure. But again, check back and look at your pressure can of the one that you get, because there's different ones. There's Presto, there's a bunch of other ones. So I'm gonna wait till it vents for 10 minutes, and when it vents, you'll see air coming out. It'll be a steady stream worth of venting. And once it does that, then once it goes for 10 minutes and air is just coming out of it, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the 15 pound of pressure on. So we're going to wait until it actually starts venting. And when it starts venting, that's when I'll bring you back so you can see when I'll start the clock. It's when you can actually see a steady stream going. That's when you start the 10 minutes. So I don't start it now. So we'll be back in around a couple of minutes, or depending on when it can start venting. So we'll be back. I don't know if you can hear that. It's officially venting. Now that it's venting, I want to let it go for 10 minutes. And if you put your hand over it, don't put it directly on it because it is hot. Just put your hand over it and you can feel the steam coming out of it. So what I'm going to do is I set the timer for 10 minutes, and it's set for 10 minutes. And we're just going to let it go. And after it reaches 10 minutes, that's when I'm going to go ahead and put the jiggler on. And I'm going to wait for this gauge to reach 15 pounds of pressure. Can't see it that well, but you get the gist of it. I'm going to wait for it to reach 15 pounds of pressure, and once it hits 15 pounds of pressure, or according to the what is it called, the All-American Pressure Manual, it lets me know that instead of just going off of this gauge, you mainly go off of the jiggler. So once this jiggler starts really jiggling a lot, you hear that first jiggle, that's when you're supposed to start your 25 minutes. Or 20 minutes if you're doing pints. I'm doing quarts, so I'm going to be doing 25 minutes. But this is just to give me an idea. This is not for sure. So I'm going to let that vent. I'm at 9 minutes now, so I'm going to let it vent, and we'll be back. Alright, it's now venting for 10 minutes, and it's beeping. So now I'm going to go ahead and put the 15 pounds of pressure on. And now what I'm going to wait for is for this to hear the first little jiggle of it. And this just gives me an idea of when it's going to reach that. Mine really starts jiggling when it reaches around 13 pounds of pressure on here. So I will be back to let you know what that looks like. That's what you want to hear. It just started rattling. So right now is when I would need to start the timer for 25 minutes. Remember, you haven't started your time until now. And right now, it's showing me it was ringing for a little bit. You can't see it as well, so I'll just let you know. It's showing me right now that it's about 14 pounds of pressure. That's what it's showing me. But in all actuality, this is what you want to go by, the actual weight here, the jiggler. Because it's letting it go no more than 15 pounds. Once it is 15 pounds of pressure, that's when it starts rocking. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to set my timer. But this is the sound you're going to be going for. I'm going to set it for 25 minutes. Another thing I should have said, as soon as you get that first jiggle, that's when you cut the burner down. You want to go ahead and cut it down to whichever will make it so that this jiggler, or depending on which pressure cooker you have, for my All-American, what it says is it's supposed to jiggle between 3 to 4 times a minute. I cut my temperature down because on my stove, it would jiggle around 3 to 4 times when I cut it down to 5. So I cut it down to 5, and it's, I just cut it down so it's still rattling, but it's going to slow down. It's going to jiggle between 3 to 4 times a minute. So you can figure out your stove and figure out at what temperature it'll rest. So every time it's jiggled, that would count as 1 jiggle. That would count as 2 jiggles. So you see what I'm saying, but the reason why it's still jiggling is because it still hasn't gotten to the 5 yet. So it's slowly going to go down, and it's going to jiggle around 3 to 4 times a minute. Alright, just want to make sure you guys know. Now it's been 25 minutes. You hear it beeping? What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off my timer, and what I'm going to do now is cut off the oven because it's been 25 minutes. And I'm just going to let this slowly drop to the 0. And once it gets to 0, I will bring it back and we will see what's next. Basically, we're going to wait the 5 minutes. Alright, it's all the way to 0. I'm going to go ahead and take this off. Still a little bit of air coming out. And when there's no more air coming out, see, it didn't take very long at all. It's basically done. What I'm going to do now is take off the love nuts in the same way I put it on, doing 2 at a time crosswise. Basically meaning I'll be opening up this one and this one across from it at the same time. This one and this one, and then this one and this one and that one and that one. So I'm going to go ahead and open it up, and I'm going to let it sit for 5 minutes. Then I'm going to take the jars out and I'll let you see that. So let me go ahead and first loosen up these love nuts, okay? When you open it up, very importantly, I just twisted it. Open it up away from you. Now I'm going to go ahead and put this aside. And there they are. And what you'll want to hear is the little ping noise. But I'm going to let it sit for 5 minutes. And then after I let it sit for 5 minutes, I'm going to take the jars out and I'm going to put them on my cutting board, which is also going to have some cloth on it, so that, because what you don't want to do is put your hard work of jars on something cold and for them to burst, because you change the temperature too rapidly. So I'm going to, as soon as I wait 5 minutes, I'll show the next scene with, I'll have taken out the jars and I'll have set them on my cutting board, and I'll be transferring them over to my, oh, did you hear that? Yay! That's one of the little pings. It'll get transferred over to my table, where I'll let them sit for at least 12 to 24 hours. At that time, they'll suck in and they will seal. I went ahead and I'm using a pillowcase. But here are my jars. Right now in front of you, there's 8 of them. I got a few more in there, so I'm going to go ahead and get those out. And the way I took them out, this is where the whole jar lifter comes out. When I took them out, I used this. These are there's no way I could be able to pick it up. It's just way too hot. So those are very, very convenient. They help you pick it up and put it down nicely. Your wonderful food. And this is the stock. So I'll come back a little later on and I'll show you my ending stock, and I'll show you how to make sure that they're actually sealed, that they have sealed. So we'll be back. Alright, here's the ending. It's been about 24 hours and all of my jars sealed, which is awesome. So in total, after I was able to get done, it was 17 of them in total, which was really nice. The way I took the lids off and I'm lifting them up by the lid. They've all been sunken down. So the only thing left for me to do is to go ahead and wash them off. And it's important to wash them off because some of the liquid steams out of it, so it can get on it. So it leaked out in the water while I was canning. So it's like on the side of it, like if you feel the lid, it's kind of, can you see my hand's kind of shiny? Yeah. So some of it got on here, some of the grease or whatnot. But they're totally sealed, so I like to wash it off so that it can be nice and clean before I put it on my shelves. So this is the end. This is basically how you would do your stock. So I would like to definitely say thank you on behalf of all your loved ones, your friends, and your family for doing all this work. I mean, no one knows how much work that you actually put in for your actual family and for your friends and your loved ones. So thank you so much for taking the time to do this. Thank you. God loves you and so do I. God bless.